Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Ask an Islander. I'm Bonnie with Project Grad, and we are here with Delaney Foster this morning. We're going to talk all about the Inclusive Islander Network. We're going to talk about your Unschooled series, which are amazing. You'll need to come out to these. And actually, we're going to start out with a little bit about you. We had a conversation the other day about, as we're growing up, I feel like everybody tells you have to be like a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. I feel like they're like these very small pigeonholed options. And you have such a cool job.
I do.
And it's such a unique position, and I'm really curious about your education and like how did you land or how did you earn this position?
So thank you, Bonnie, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm very excited. Bonnie is a great supporter of our programs, and I hope that you all will be supporters as well. So my job is incredibly cool. I'm the Assistant Director for Engagement Initiatives. And so like a lot of college titles, that one is a little bit hard to understand. But basically what that means is I get to do inclusion and diversity and multiculturalism work all day long. And that's my passion. So I get to provide trainings and workshops. I get to do awesome research, and they pay me to do it, which is, I'm incredibly fortunate. So ultimately, we want all of our students to leave as culturally competent members of the workforce. So what that means is we want them to go into the world being able to work with people who are different than them, who look different, who have come from different faith backgrounds, come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and even people who just have different learning styles.
Right.
Because that makes your life more rich, it makes your company more successful, it makes your team stronger.
Right.
It's all winning and no losing, basically, when you practice inclusion. I think that's the myth about inclusion, is people think they're going to lose some piece of who they are, but actually what we want is to bring those pieces out, and that's what I get to do in my trainings and workshops.
Yeah.
That's why they're my all-time favorite thing to do. So I got this job, I guess, in a sort of a weird way. One of my undergraduate degrees is in history. My plan was to go into archival research and to museum work, because my intention was to give voice to the cultures and peoples that we have silenced, basically, because there's definitely a history is written by the victor element in play, and I was hoping to rebalance some of that, and I still would long term love to rewrite some textbooks for high school and elementary school students. That's still something I want to do. But I graduated in the worst recession in America since the Great Recession, and people couldn't pay their mortgages, and they certainly couldn't donate to museums or archives. And it made me realize that maybe that wasn't as tenable of an idea as I thought it was. And during that time, I'd also been very active in housing and in student leadership. And I realized that there was a way to combine the thing I was good at, which was student leadership, and the thing I loved, which was giving voices to those who had been silenced. And so I ended up getting a bunch of diversity and inclusion training at conferences. I went on to graduate school, and I worked with a bunch of honor students who were a fascinating group to me because they came from all different socioeconomic backgrounds and racial backgrounds and religious backgrounds, but yet they were all seeking very similar things. And for me, it crystallized that this was what I wanted to do. So I became a safe zone trainer at my previous institution, which meant that I could provide that training, and we actually ended up training the President's Cabinet in Safe Zone, which is a 3.5-hour intensive workshop.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, well, I was kind of okay at that. I was kind of good at that, which I did not really expect to be. I honestly didn't. That was never a role that I had sought. But they liked it, and they liked the way I broke it down. That's something that I try really hard to do in my workshops is break it down and make it applicable and usable. Because we have a lot of theories up here, but what does that mean to the everyday person?
Right.
Basically is what I try to focus on. Sometimes I do get wrapped up in theory. So I started this job, the one I had previous to this, here at the university. That sentence didn't make a lot of sense.
You're good.
Okay.
We're going to coast right over that.
Great. So I started as the coordinator for student engagement, and what that meant is that I was splitting my time between doing diversity and inclusion work and alcohol and drug abuse prevention work.
Oh, wow.
Both of which are very important. I was not as good at the alcohol and drug abuse stuff because it just wasn't my area of expertise.
Right.
I learned very quickly to appreciate it, and I will tell you I have a much deeper understanding of really the role that drug and alcohol abuse plays in people's lives.
Yeah.
And I also began to realize the way it intersects with socially disadvantaged groups. So for example, did you know that in neighborhoods that are primarily black, cigarettes cost almost twice as much?
What?
Yeah, and whereas malt liquor is significantly lower priced. So there's this really interesting process that happens of health and social justice, and that's actually what today's Unschool is all about.
Yes.
So it's sort of, we've really come full circle, because I think people have this, they forget that medical care and medicine and doctors and the whole process is a system, and any system can be oppressive or it can be freeing. Now, I'm not saying all doctors are bad. I would argue most doctors are wonderful, loving, caring people. We have some outstanding nursing majors here. I've had outstanding nursing care myself, but sometimes the system can be a little bit broken without the individuals in it necessarily being completely culpable.
Right, absolutely.
And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about today at our Unschooled, which is at noon in Lone Star, is going to be the history that Americans have with medical experimentation on people of color, on other people who come from disadvantaged or minoritized identities, really is the focus. We're going to talk about that, which I know sounds really heavy and dark, but it's actually kind of their swan song, because so much of modern medical care was developed on these people who didn't know they were doing it. And and of course that was a deeply unethical thing to do, but I want to highlight some of the struggles that they went through and some of the treatment that was terrible and unethical and inhumane, and show how their struggle for us in some ways was incredibly important and was incredibly impactful. But I also want to highlight the reason those people were chosen were because they were on the fringes of society, and we as a society didn't think they'd be missed. And so the question I'm going to pose today at Unschooled is, well, who is that group right now? I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to have.
They are always interesting conversations.
Thank you.
They are so much fun, y'all. They're lunchtime, which is wonderful, and she will feed you if you come in on time.
It was very good lunch. It's not just pizza.
It's delicious, y'all. And it's at noon today.
Yes. It's
in Lone Star.
That's correct.
Okay, and this one's called Truth Serum. And I'm super excited about this one. And if you, just for kind of like some reference, like she did another one in October, which was about myth versus reality. Which was amazing. We got to learn all about like where black cats came from and like the evil eye and all of these like really interesting cultural phenomenons that maybe we didn't know where they came from. And it was, I mean, these are really fun. It's an hour of your time. You come and you eat, meet amazing people. You have really great I feel like you're a great facilitator for these. And you feel very comfortable having conversations that maybe are difficult or maybe are things that, like this with the medical, I feel like it's one of those things we don't talk about. And it's not something, it's hard to talk about, but it's incredibly important that we do. I was thinking when you were saying that when we were at Ellis Island earlier this year, like there's a bunch of plaques in there and they hint on it that the medical care that the immigrants were receiving was like rudimentary at best. And it was just, and they had all of these very lower, I don't know what the word is, but the materials that they had or the equipment they had was very low grade for these people because it was the sort of people that didn't have a strong enough voice. They couldn't do that to the citizens or the white upper class who were already living in the U.S.
So my hope is that if we can explain to students and to staff and faculty, both anyone who comes, sort of how that stuff happens, almost, I don't want to say on accident, but we're almost not even conscious that those things are happening sometimes. So how do we then become conscious, and how do we then become a part of the resistance to stop those things from happening?
Absolutely.
Because I would be willing to bet that if everyday Americans knew what was happening to those immigrants at Ellis Island, which was horrible, by the way, they probably would have taken action. But they just didn't know, or they didn't know how to take action. And I think I want to help people do that in whatever way is most appropriate for them, because everybody has different spheres of influence.
Absolutely, different lanes. So if we're interested, or if other people are interested in Unschooled, where can we find information on them, and where do we RSVP?
So everything is on iEngage. iEngage is our wonderful new involvement platform, and if you don't have an account, it'll take you like 3 seconds to set up. You just use your Islander ID and follow us. We are the Inclusive Islander Network. So when you join us, it's kind of like liking a Facebook page, right, or following someone on Twitter. You'll get automatic emails, you'll get automatic posts, and it'll add right to your calendar if you accept it. And you'll get reminders. It's wonderful, because I don't know about y'all, I need calendar reminders.
I do. I really need to, and I'm always the person who gets the alerts and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's today!" And I'm like scrambling to grab things as I run.
It's in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, and it's cross campus, and I'm not ready. Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So absolutely. So check out iEngage for those. You can RSVP for them. This is the last one for this semester.
It is.
Today at noon, and then we start again in February with Trashy and Bougie, which we're very excited about.
And that's
So
about the
excited
origin of stereotypes, because stereotypes govern so much of our behavior towards each other, but I think very rarely do we sit and consider where they came from.
Yeah, because I think they're so touchy. I think
They
we don't like to use them, or we feel bad about like when we do use them on accident. And so I think it's really important to understand where that stuff comes from.
Yeah, because it's not about creating shame. That's never my goal, is to make someone feel ashamed. It's just to help us all do better. Because ultimately we can all do better. I can do better. You can do better.
Yeah, there's always work to be done. And I think you run those things with such an open mind that they're really nice. Yeah, y'all come check them out today at noon. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. I appreciate it. We will be back actually after the holiday with Allison Marks. We are going to be in the counseling center. We're going to talk about how we adapt to change and how we can become more resilient and kind of roll with the punches. It's so hard when you're in school. There's so much going on when you have a job and then a personal life. We totally understand. We're going to give y'all some tips on how to adapt better, how to kind of roll with everything. Also, if you haven't been to the Tempest, I order everybody to go. It's still running tonight, tomorrow night, and a Sunday matinee, $5 cash at the box office. It's amazing. Thank y'all so much. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks, Bonnie.
We'll see y'all next time.